Welcome to Adapted, the show where we discuss adaptations of various forms. My name is Tom, and with me is...
Pat?
Paul Heyse was born in 1830 in a post-Napoleon German confederacy of 39 states, a confederacy that would eventually collapse in 1866 with the Prussian-Austrian War. We also had some problems such as in March of 1848, when a revolution of sorts erupted in Germany and was eventually put down by Prussian troops. Into this world, we see the psyche and intentions of Mr. Heyse, who becomes a member of the Vormars, the Before March movement, which was a literary movement that kind of looked towards a unification of Germany, and that was deeply affected by these kind of revolutionary instincts which they were opposed to, but they wanted a nationalism in Germany, and he was devoted to this his whole life. He was born to a philologist, so this is in the very early years in which linguists are beginning to become a thing in the world. He was trained as a linguist for a time, and he actually studied Italian, and he went to Italy and studied Italian history and art, though he got kicked out of the Vatican Museum for copying down an untranslated manuscript. So he got the boot from the Vatican. But however, his work was apparently so popular that he became a kind of a somewhat celebrity and reignited interest in Italian art in Germany. The Emperor Maximilian II offered him a professorship in Munich, and his one duty was to attend literary soirees given by Maximilian II. For this, he was paid 100 guilder, so about $32,000 a year, and he had to do nothing but write poems for the king. Pretty good gig. He also established the German art group Tunnel over the Spree, and this is a group of artists who met anonymously, and they worked to create these things, these poems and plays and pictorial art that celebrated idealism and the revolutionary spirit of the mid-19th century. It's odd, I think a lot of them actually turned out to be aristocrats, even though they liked revolution, so there's a bit of a contradiction in that movement.
Oh, go read Dostoevsky's The Possessed, and it all makes
Yes,
sense.
and you'll
You'll
get
figure
it.
that out all real quick, how much these
Yeah.
morons didn't get the game they were playing.
Yeah. I mean, Hesse himself thought he was going to join an 1848 militia, and he almost did, but he declined to do so because he thought it would upset his mother. He became famous again in the 50s and 60s, not for Italian history, but for his novellas. And he's often credited for the psychological novella, though that doesn't seem to be necessarily accurate, I don't think. He seems to be more interested in a sort of picturesque poetry that is what he became kind of famous for.
He's not, I mean, for the ones I've read, he's not Stendhal. Like he's not,
No.
that's a psychological
Mhm.
novelist. Stendhal is. But I think the idea is well, we'll get it to when we get to, is it La Arabia? I'm going to pronounce it wrong.
Il Arrabbiata.
Il Arrabbiata. The spicy one. I saw I thought it was the spicy one was the translation I saw. But I like that too. But yeah, that there is a sense that it, well, we'll get to it. Keep going.
Yeah.
Finish your
Oh,
thing.
no. It's so that he formed another group, Der Crocodile, that was all about celebrating the peasants, even though again it seemed to be made up of aristocrats. And in the 1880s, his star began to fall as a new naturalist school began to emerge, not only in Germany, but in a lot of places, in France, and even here in America. The naturalists in Germany began to attack him specifically because they wanted to include more of the grittiness of the real world. I mean, if you think of somebody like Balzac or Zola, they are quite inclined to include sexual
Proust or like
relations.
Proust or something. Not Proust. Madame Bovary.
Oh, Flaubert.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Flaubert. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, they were much more inclined. Those people did not like the sort of lofty view of the lower classes that Heyse and fellow artists were putting forward. He responded with his kind of last great novel, Merlin, from 1892, which repeated a lot of those kind of themes. The Yeah, so that was a fight over do you depict the darker sides of things, which, considering the afterlife of his 1865 play Kolberg, is quite ironic. Hesse was a big advocate for German unification, but was not happy how it cashed out with Bismarck and his work in 1871 and bringing everything kind of under a Prussian model. He did die, Paul, no, not not, Paul Hesse died a few months before World War One in 1914. So he missed the war that would devastate his home Germany. And we're talking to start about L'Arrabbiata, and this was a book he wrote in Italy when he was studying there and first making his name. And we're starting up with this book. We both read this one. It's a short book. It is pretty much, if you're going to read something by him, it's going to be this. Kohlberg is probably famous for the film that was made out of it, but nobody's even bothered to translate the German into anything else.
We
So
really tried. I
we
tried.
really tried.
I ordered multiple copies of this thing on Amazon, being like, "Oh, this one says it's in English," and then they don't have any samples of it, and then they would order, and then they would ship it. And I go, "Nope, this one's also in German." Every single people keep claiming it's been translated into English. It hasn't. So you cannot. I could not find a copy of Kohlberg. My brother. He speaks German fluently. He's lived in Germany many years. He couldn't find a copy of it. He actually just inherited the German library from a university near where he lives. So he got like 750 volumes of translated German. No copy of Kohlberg. He's like, I got lots of other Hesse, but no Kohlberg. So this book just isn't available in English as far as I can tell. We could not find it.
Yeah, but La Arrabbiata it's been translated a few times, and it's something, if anybody talks about this man, and nobody seems to, he seems to have dropped off. I even went into the academic library where I work, and there wasn't any essays on him. There was just works by him. Nobody wrote anything
I'm
about
kind of
this man.
surprised at that, but yeah, I mean, well,
Yeah.
hey, you've got something to do.
Yeah, oh yeah, great, thank you. So let's start with La Arrabbiata. It is a book about a young woman who is determined not to get married because she sees her mother in somewhat of an abusive relationship with her father. She takes a boat from Sorrento to Capri, I believe, and there to sell some thread, it looks like. And she's on the boat with the boatman, who has a kind of affection for her, and a priest,
He's got a
and
big old crush on her.
you
He's
got a
got
big
big old
old
crush. He got big
crush.
old crush.
Yeah. And eventually, on the way back, the boatman grabs her and he says, nobody's going to marry you but me. And she bites his hand and jumps into the water. And then he goes and pulls her out. And then she realizes she hurt his hand and it's bleeding. And she mourns and begs forgiveness. And then they're going to go
He
off.
begs forgiveness too, to give
And
him his
he
due.
begs forgiveness
His
too.
due. He
Yeah.
begs forgiveness for trying to murder her, and
Yeah.
she begs forgiveness for biting his hand.
Yeah. And in the end, we see her in the confessional to the priest saying, discussing that she's now going to be with this man. And that's that. That's that book. I will say I'm going to give this book a lot credit. And
Yeah.
my idea with this book is that it is a sort of jokey end. That eventually what she says is, in the reason why she isn't going to get married is her father beats her mother, then cries and says he loves her, and then they go through this kind of emotional cycle of intensity. It's intense anger, then intense love, and intense anger, and she basically just doesn't want to go through that with anyone, and so she's kind of hardened her heart. And then what we see is she goes through that cycle with someone and gets married to them. And so I think my reading of the book is, despite the sort of priestly confirmation of the goodness of their union, that this is in fact her failure to escape from these type of relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, you're right. I think there is a sense of it's ironic. She says she wouldn't do it, and yet she does it. I'm not sure it's meant to be a joke, though. I'm not sure it's meant to be sort of even sort of not funny per se. I think it's an observation that this is very real. This is how many relationships work. People see their parents, they say they won't become their parents, and then they do become their parents, even the things they don't like about their parents to a certain extent, in the relationships they said they didn't like about things. And so there's a very, and I think this is the appeal of it to some extent, is that it's more psychologically honest than a lot of literature from this period that I've read. And there is some really good literature, but it does tend to be a little more if you go and read, I don't know, like Anthony Trollope or something, there are even someone like Dickens. Like I really, Dickens is fine, but Dickens sort of has everything almost has this joke and everything sort of winds up and the everything's knitted together all evenly and neatly and everyone sort of winds up where you think they should for the most part at the end. This sort of says like, nah, life is messy and it breaks a lot and people don't end up where they think they wanted to. They will do the exact thing that they said they wouldn't do and not even realize they did it. And I think that's sort of that's a psychological realism that sometimes doesn't show up in literature until a little later. It's not like this has a feeling of like this has a little feeling to me at least of like a proto Hemingway. There's almost this sense here of he's going to just show these sort of broken people as they are and let them be morons and make moronic decisions and not necessarily the narrator is not passing any judgment. There's no sense of moral here. The priest is passing moral judgment within the novel, but he's clueless and is passing very stupid moral opinions. He doesn't actually have any clue what he's talking about. So there's this. It's the lack of moral tone from the author in face of individuals making really stupid decisions. And that's why I feel like it has that Hemingway feel to it. It has a very modern feel. This is the first thing we've read, other than maybe a little bit of, of Kipling, that if you took this story and you plopped this in a modern literary magazine, it wouldn't feel out of place, right?
I would agree with that. What I meant by jokey or whatnot is the voice piece character, which is the priest. The priest is the character that
Yeah.
speaks for the audience, is completely wrong.
Yeah.
I think that's the joke of it. I think the joke is
Yes,
that
I
we
agree.
get the
There is a joke.
priest.
Yes. There is a humor here. Yeah.
Yeah, the priest at the beginning and the priest is he's also a bracket character. He's at the beginning and introduces things. He's the last character we hear speak at the end. And yet his framing is ultimately missing
Distorting.
something. Yeah.
Distorting.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a frame which distorts like a funhouse mirror.
Sure. Um, but like to your point, even though this is 1858, I believe, it does feel very modern. And I like the comparison to Hemingway. I think Hemingway would be a little more brutal than, but still, you're right. There's something very Hemingway-ish about it, about this sort
It's the
of
lack of moralizing,
moralizing.
moral. I speak good. Moralizing from the narrator. Like it's that lack of the tone is non-judgmental. And that is I don't it's unusual for 19th century literature in my experience, especially mid 19th century literature. There's always this sort of feeling that God's waiting in the wings to offer you his, even in like the Brontes or something. There's always this feeling that God's waiting to come in and tell you what, and by God I mean the narrator, like the author. There's this feeling that God's always waiting in the wings, coming in to be like, let me tell you about that. Let me tell you about, this situation between Heathcliff. Let me tell you. And it's not a that's just how they wrote. It's not there. You never feel like he's going to step in and inform you what you should think about something. And that's modern. That's really modern.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that observation a lot. That's true. You don't, it's interesting because with the naturalist, you see that also. Like I would think if you look at Madame Bovary or something like that, the Flaubert in that, we mentioned this last week or this week, I can't remember which. We record the things at the beginning at the same time, The Flaubert thing is
Honestly, I can't remember when we talked about it. Did we talk about it last week?
Flaubert
That's
and Madame
legit.
Bovary.
Oh no, no, that was this week.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. Flaubert was he also doesn't really judge the character, even though the character is acting in unconventional ways that are considered immoral or whatnot. You don't have the stakes aren't the same though. The stakes in
No,
this are fairly low, and so even though you don't have,
Tom, love is not a low stake. Philistine.
yeah, I mean, you kind of get the
I'm
sense that
kidding.
they're gonna get together, right? That it's not gonna be this sort of,
I didn't get the sense they were going to drown each other, or he was.
yeah,
The thing I was waiting for was maybe he would die of an infection from his hand, in which I was going to be like, oh, like why? I thought it
why
was
would
going to
you
be
do
like, I love you, but I bit you, and so you died. I was waiting for it to be like, oh
that?
yeah, this is 1850s literature.
Yeah.
He like, I love the hand that bites you. It's just like, I bite the hand that loves you or whatever. It was like that's what I thought was gonna happen. I was thinking, oh, that's so annoying. But they didn't. So yes, the stakes are fairly low. If they will she could end up alone, just, an old spinster, and he'll find someone else to marry, and it probably would be fine.
Yeah. So it's a little different than Flaubert there, but there's something similar of that, like you're saying, like that kind of lack of judgment. And I love the fact this is still my favorite part of it, is that the audience POV character is a complete idiot. He
Yeah.
completely misses what's happening. The sort of repetition, I guess what we today would call a repetition of abuse, right? That somebody
Yeah.
repeats that in their own life. Like he completely misses it because he's just into young pretty girls should get married and reproduce.
Yeah, and single men with a good living should be the ones that marry them. Like
Mhm.
that's clearly his perspective.
Yeah, it's a very simple one, but it doesn't solve any of the problems.
Even the ideas of like cycle of abuse, like that's certainly a theme in something like say Wuthering Heights, but that's not I don't think in my experience of reading a lot of literature from the time period, like that's not a theme. Abuse in general, like the concept of abuse isn't a theme that gets a lot of attention. Maybe, I mean, Dickens tends to give it a bit in my experience, but it's not given the same level. But like Wuthering Heights certainly plays with the idea of generational abuse, and this one is certainly doing it on a smaller scale. But even that's a very modern, strikes me as a modern concept.
Yeah, Dickens does it with children. Children
Yeah,
suffer abuse, and that's a signal of moral deterioration.
yeah.
Yeah,
But it's
that's
not as if, oh, because David Copperfield suffered abuse, therefore he's going to be abusive
abuse
himself. Or
others. Yeah,
because,
that's
because
not
Pip
there.
was abusive, it doesn't mean that he's going to abuse others. Like, there's no sense here of an inevitability of what happens to you as a child is going to reflect upon you as an adult. Dickens kind of has it as like, no, you escape it and you overcome it. Whereas Wuthering Heights and this seem to have more of a scene of like, nah, if you were whipped as a kid, you're probably going to whip your own kids. And if you watched your own mother get abused, you're probably going to accept abuse in your own relationship. That seems to be a theme running through this. And it's again, I still think I'm surprised this doesn't have more attention today, this story in particular, because it feels, again, I feel like you could pop this out and plop it into any literary magazine that I've read, and it would be their cover story. And that for 1850 is surprising. Many, many, many of those just don't age that well. And this one, despite probably being even an old translation of it, still feels fresh to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, and it could be the case we're giving it too much credit, but I don't think so. I think
I don't
that,
think so. I think
yeah,
this is legit. This is the only other one other than I've read a decent amount of Kipling, but it's the only other one that I've been like, huh, I kind of want to read a little more Paul Hesse now. Like I actually do want to find more of his. I certainly was not thinking that about my old friend, what was his name? Bjornston of Bjornson, or Jose Echegaray, or that French poet thing. Like those are just
Mistral, yeah.
the things are intolerable.
Yeah.
This thing is like, I wonder if this guy has some other stuff, and that's why
Uh-huh.
I read the ghost story. I went to my local library and I'm like, does my library have anything by this guy? And they had a collection of Victorian ghost stories that had one of his ghost stories in it. So I gave that a read. That's the
Mm-hmm.
mid. I guess do we have anything else about the
I'm good. I
spicy
think that
one? Do
was
we have
good.
anything
Yeah,
else
the
about the spicy
spicy
one?
one. I prefer that.
The
Yeah,
spicy
the,
one.
the angry one or something. Yeah, let's talk about Midday Magic. Midday Magic is a story about a person who has finished university and he wants to kind of recover. And he goes off to Bavaria, right? It's Bavaria he goes to. And he goes to get a house there to relax, but unfortunately it's become a little touristy. And he eventually finds something. And the people there are like, the couple who runs it are kind of like, oh, should we let him go in there? Yeah, I guess it'll be fine. And he goes there and he sees these pictures on the wall of a man and a woman. He doesn't see them, and then eventually he sees the woman come out by this stream, and she starts managing these, the kind of managing the garden, and then disappears again. And it's sort of an idea of her ghost had come out and visited him, and that she had drowned herself after her potential husband had gone off to fight the French and had died fighting Napoleon. And then she, in the gown that she was supposed to go to a dance with him, she wore that and drowned herself. And now he had saw her ghost. And then that's it. That's the end.
Very Ophelian. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a sort of kind of that I think of the Pre-Raphaelite picture of Ophelia in the stream. That's what this made me think of.
I was thinking of the intro to the Brothers Karamazov where he talks about how the woman who had drowned herself, but if she drowned herself or throw herself off a cliff, but it was the if the cliff had just been a little bit less picturesque, if it had been just not quite as good of a view and just not as romantic, she probably would still be alive because she wouldn't have thrown herself off of a prosaic cliff. It had to be it's like a great
Yeah.
opening to a novel.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, it's again, I found it interesting in the sense that I love ghost stories. I really like ghost stories. And so this isn't there are certain ghost stories that are like the best ghost stories that have ever been written. Henry James usually is on that list. Oliver Onions, one of my favorite writers, is on that list. You know, these are the great writers of like the best ghost stories, and obviously like Edgar Allan Poe has really good ones. You know, these are there are some very good ghost stories out there. This is not going to be topping that list, but it's an interesting one. It actually reminds me a little bit of Oliver Onions. Have you ever read him?
I have not. No.
You got to read Oliver Onions. The Beckoning Fair one is one of the best ghost stories ever written. Um, but it's a little bit similar setup. It's the Beckoning Fair ones is this he's a writer, he's desperately working on this novel, he's trying to find a way to get away. He finds a new house where he can live that's really like secluded and this kind of stuff. And obviously then he's visited by a ghost. Um, but the idea here is like it has a kind of creepy buildup. It's like the classic creepy buildup. You see a photo, you know, you see a painting, and then oh, of course you're going to then see the person in the painting. So it kind of has that, but it again it has the feeling. What it really it reminded me of a combination of that in its setup, and then in its actual sort of release, its sort of its dramatic moment, it reminds me of an Isaac Dinesen. She has a really good one. Again, she's one of the best ghost stories ever written, which is The Supper at Elsinore. Have you read that one?
I have not. No.
Again, it's another really good one. A similar kind of concept about these two women who their brother went off to fight Napoleon and he died maybe in the war, maybe as a privateer hanged in the Caribbean. It's never clear. Maybe as a pirate in the Caribbean. They never know. But one day, when they're relatively old, it's supposed to be they're like in their 60s or 70s. Their housekeeper in the city basically is like there one day, and the brother is just sitting at the table, and he won't talk to anybody. And then she like basically she's like, oh my gosh, the ghost has come, and so she sends to them to come back to the city, and they come back and he's just sitting at the table sitting there, and then they talk to his ghost for a while. But it has that sort of feel to it that it's not necessarily scary, but it sort of has that eerie melancholy like structure that it's not meant to scare you, and it's not like the best ghost stories where you're not quite sure whether the ghost is really there, but it still, I thought, has this just sort of melancholy sadness of an individual. It's not a scare you kind of story, but I still liked it.
I did. There's a sense of. So I read this ghost story of his and another one. I don't.
Ooh, cool. I didn't
The
know there
other
was another.
one was. I should have wrote the
Is that
name.
one you mentioned last week that I hadn't read?
No, Count Ernest's Home is not exactly a ghost story. It's not a ghost story at all. It's not exactly a ghost story because it
It's
simply
not
is not.
exactly a ghost story. It's exactly not a ghost story.
Little Lisbeth. So I read another story by his in the same edition that had Midday Magic called Little Lisbeth. And that kind of has the same thing. So I'll compare them. In Midday Magic, the ghost comes back and she wants to take care of the garden, right? She's like, oh, it's kind of growing without me, right? She says at one point. In Little Lisbeth, there's a girl who's kind of super, a young girl, like 8, and she's like really, really awkward. And she can't make friends with anyone, but she loves animals. And so she starts taking care of a bunch of rabbits. And at one point, she lets the rabbits go out and play on the lawn, and a dog goes after the rabbits, and she gets in front of the dog, and the dog bites her. She gets infected, she dies. And then, her friend, who's the audience POV character, is hanging out and sees the ghost and keeps seeing the ghost. And she's like, "Oh, what does she want?" And she realizes that she wants to take care of the rabbits. And so the friend goes into the girl's house where they've put the rabbits back, and no one's been feeding them. And the rabbits are dying. And there's one rabbit left alive. And so the girl feeds the rabbit, and the rabbit's okay. And then the ghost can go away. So there's sort of sense in both of these of a idea of like the ghost wants the things that are living near their tragedy to continue to live. Like they're sort of jealous of, or not even jealous. They
Not
just
jealous, but
they just want
they
things
feel
to
a
be
sense of
alive.
they feel a sense of responsibility for
Mhm.
the things that are alive in the place where they died.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's it. And it is yeah, it's an interesting idea. I don't know exactly what to make of it, other than there's a sort of like I guess cultivation of the natural world that is going on. I guess it's sort of one of these like kind of honoring the peasants thing, but
Yeah.
yeah, it also connects it to the land, right? Again, that's another theme in these early things, the land.
The
But
land.
yeah.
But I guess it's just I find him an interesting writer because again, I thought a lot of these writers, especially from the mid 19th century, a lot of these guys that are winning the Nobel Prize at this period of time are stodgy. And not only are they just difficult to read because of their language, which fine, whatever, I can get over that. They're difficult to read because they're just boring, and they're not they're not doing many interesting things. This guy is I found surprisingly interesting. I don't think apparently he's not particularly influential because no one's writing about him. I don't know if maybe he's more influential in German.
I
I don't get that
listened
impression.
to a brief lecture by someone who's like, who's a German who's covering all of the German Nobel Prize winners. And he basically said, no one reads this. This man has no influence in Germany anymore. Um,
How interesting.
yeah.
I guess others were doing it better, maybe. I mean, I agree. When Jeopardy had their category on German Nobel Prize winners, they were able to get through them all in one category. I don't think his name was good. No one is expecting anyone to know. They might expect people to know Hermann Hesse. They're not expecting anyone to know Paul. Is it Hermann Hesse? Am I saying that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Hesse,
Yeah, okay.
Hesse, right?
I see. Well, then I was like, shoot, wait, this is Paul Heyse. I was like, shoot, did I mix
Heyse.
up the names? Yeah, Heyse, whatever.
Paul. Hmm.
I just want to make sure I wasn't mixing up the names. So
Hmm.
this guy, I think they just were like, he once wrote a story about a group of angels that have a C in their name, and it was like cherubim or something. Like it was like, see, he didn't even make it about the author. He just made it about like angelology because no one is going to know this man.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think it's interesting. I kind of want to read a little more Paul. He say. He's the only one that we've come across that I thought
Yeah.
I want to read a little more of him to find out whether he's actually interesting.
It seems like people in his day did not regard his novels, his longer novels, very well. Because I do have one, and it's very long, and I didn't even bother starting it. But I think
Yeah, but his short
the
stories
novellas and
seem,
short
yeah.
stories seem to be the things that are very highly regarded. It's also highly regarded. His play from 1865, Kolberg. And
Which
I can
no
find
one will translate into English,
for
even on bootleg copies on the internet.
yeah. We have translation software. Are you not bothering to even be lazy enough to do that?
I mean, I guess we could have just loaded it into AI and had a
Yeah, we
very
should have done
confusing
that.
translation.
But anyway, so apparently this play is based off the autobiography of Kolberg's mayor, Joachim Nittelbeck, who's the main
Oh,
character in the
that's
play.
why he could seem so amazing.
Yeah, it's
Although
yeah,
it's hard to tell since we haven't read the book as to whether the movie was accurately reflecting the novel. I
reflecting the
don't know.
play. Yeah, I have no idea, but it was his
Apparently, it was a
autobiography.
novel first. I think it was a novel first, then he wrote it as a play.
Oh, okay. I thought it was an autobiography, then a play, but maybe it was a
No, I think
novel
Heyse
also.
wrote it as a novel. So it could have
Oh.
been, there certainly could have been an autobiography. I think Heyse wrote it as a novel. Then it, I guess, must have done well enough that he, or poorly enough, that he could have been like All the King's Men, where All the King's Men started as a play, apparently. And
Oh,
it
did
was,
it?
yeah, apparently it was a total disaster.
Mhm.
And so he wrote it as a novel. So
Mhm.
who knows? Maybe this is a similar story. But he then I think wrote it as a play. That was my understanding. Again, in my desperate attempts to find an English translation of this thing.
Mhm. There you go. But anyway, it's a play, and then the film also about the French. Apparently, the play is about this. The French troops, the besieging of the town of Kolberg in 1807 by Napoleon, and that's what it's about. It's about the town organizing to hold off the French, and and they do against all
All
odds.
odds.
Yeah. And Joseph Goebbels, he loved it. So he started
He
planning.
thought this is perfect for
This is
my
perfect. He started in 1841. He helped write the screenplay, though he didn't get any credit for it.
1941, I hope.
1941, excuse me. Yeah, he started working on it in 1941. It entered production in 43, and Veit Harland was selected to direct the film after his success with the anti-Jewish film Jude Sus. So that's another successful Nazi propaganda film. It was made between October and August of 44. We're not really sure how many extras were used for this project. The director claimed
It must be
200,000.
enormous.
Yeah, so the director claimed 186,000. And people are like, no, you
There's
didn't get
not
a.
that many. You
There's
didn't get
not many.
186,000.
It's probably more like 5,000.
That seems reasonable. But there's
Yeah,
a ton
there's a lot of people
of
they pulled out.
people.
Yeah, it premiered at La Rochelle on January 30th of
That seems
1945.
ironic. La Rochelle was the.
Yeah. And that was 2 months before the liberation of the city. It
Okay.
was,
Oh, this was in Paris. So it no, wait, it couldn't have been in Paris. 1940.
no,
No.
it was January 30th, 1945.
And what city did it premiere in?
La Rochelle.
Oh, that's the city name. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
It was screened also after Hitler's last radio address. So Hitler had his last radio address on January 30th. Right after that, they screened this. About a month after the screening, the Soviets attacked the city of Kolberg, which, after a long siege, fell to Polish and Soviet forces in March. And that became the second siege of Kolberg. It was screened in Argentina and Switzerland as
That's not a surprise.
yeah, for a number of years under the title of Burning Hearts, and it was eventually released in West Germany in 1966. So that's kind of the history of this thing here. I know the main actor who played Nettelbeck
It's quite
was a
good.
he's quite good, and he spent a long time and eventually died in a Soviet camp after
Well,
making this movie.
I
Yeah,
know. I might not be a surprise.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
Good actor.
Apparently, the director, Harlan, survived and kept making movies after. His son was very successful in French cinema. I guess his son
Hmm.
moved on to France, but that's this movie. And goodness, what is the plot of this? Besides the invasion,
Oh,
there's
it's
a
a
number
long
of
plot. I
casts.
mean,
It's
it's very
very
hard to
boring.
follow the plot because it's a fairly boring plot. It's also like you can tell this is a movie that should have been longer, but or maybe it shouldn't have been longer, but it's one of those movies that you're just like, wait, where did we just, how did it, why are we here? Where did, you were
Yeah.
just on a beach. Why are
The-
you in a tavern? You're like, oh, we went back in time.
hmm And,
I don't
and
know
and
how I was supposed to get that.
yeah, so the worst one, so there's huge continuity problems. First of
Yeah,
all, the movie opens with what the movie is trying to do is a frame. It's trying to say that the main general is
Gneisenau,
Gneisenau is convincing the emperor, is it, to embrace the democratic spirit of war.
a citizen
Yeah, the
army. Yeah, he's
citizen
trying to get a
army
citizen army.
and go out and fight the French. And so he then we zoom back. He doesn't even seem to be telling the emperor about Kolberg, but we
Well,
zoom
he
back.
says, no, he says when he's talking to the emperor, he says, I saw the citizen army work. It worked at Kolberg.
And
And
the
let me
emperor
tell you,
goes, "Yeah, that was a
and then he
great
goes, let me
victory."
tell you about Kolberg. But then, which confused me, I went, oh, I guess this is contemporaneous. And then I
Mm.
didn't get that until that dude showed up like that hour and a half later.
Yeah.
I went, oh, no, that wasn't, this is in the past. I'm like, oh,
Mm.
shoot. But anyway, yeah, so then, then they
Then
go
we
back to Kolberg.
that well, no, we have to stop and see the dissolution of all the Austria of the Holy Roman Emperor.
Oh, I might have zoned that out.
Right?
Oh,
That
yes, yes,
we
yes. We
have
get
to
to see that. Yes.
jump into Vienna and see that thing fall apart. Then we jump to Kolberg, and we don't know. I didn't know where I
I had
what.
no idea where I
Yeah,
was.
I
Yeah.
didn't know we were going into the past. I'm like,
No.
okay, I guess we're in
I thought it
Kol.
was contemporary. Yeah, I thought it was
Yeah,
contemporary.
and then eventually you figure it out.
Which I don't think you're supposed to. I think you're supposed to. I mean, maybe this is something. This might be one of those things where it's like a contemporary audience would have known. I don't know. Like, would this be like someone in the Civil War being like, and remember the days of George Washington? And any contemporary, well, most, I mean, hopefully they would know that George Washington was not around during the Civil War. So when we see George Washington, we know, we're in the past. Like that, I don't, maybe, but probably
Yeah,
not.
but I mean, it's like, but the past is the difference between years. I think is like 1812 and 1807.
It was 1800, no, it's 1806 and 1813.
1806 and 1813. Okay, so it's not that long in the like the
No, no, it's not.
you
But
can
again, I
imagine.
don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe people have a more detailed knowledge of history
of Kolberg
of the Holy Roman Emperor. I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah. I just couldn't. You couldn't fault and so there's a
My
number
knowledge of the period of the Holy Roman Empire and Kolberg is limited. So yes, I was not
to
able to
this
follow the
movie.
time shifts.
Yeah, no, the movie doesn't help you. And it mostly follows the representative of the people, Joachim Nittelbeck, and then you have trying to convince all the villains who are the people who are not willing, who want to surrender to the
Want
French.
to save their property or
They
save
want
their
to
homes or
save their
save
property, and
their lives.
they're bad people. And so he's trying to convince them to get to war. And so he gets a friend of his daughter, Maria, played by Christina Soderbaum, who actually lived to the 21st century, that actress.
Good Lord.
Yeah, she died in 2001.
Oh, so she barely made it. Okay.
She barely made it, I guess.
I guess it's true because she was probably only like 20, so she was probably
Mhm.
born in like 1925. She could have easily made that. Yeah, yeah.
She was born in 1912.
I'm sure she was an old. Yeah, I guess so. She was well, whatever. She was in
Yeah,
her yeah
but
30s during this.
mhm. Yeah. She apparently had trouble getting work after the Nazi era.
One
I don't
wonders
know
why.
why.
Wonders why.
But anyway,
She
so
was a rocket scientist. She'd have had a job, but
yes. But
as an actress,
yeah. So she's tasked with getting a letter to the emperor to get Gneisenau to come and defend the city.
because the stodgy old man who's defending it now wants to just surrender.
He just wants to surrender, and that's
Yeah.
bad.
And
And
he's all, it sort of has that like get off my lawn type
thing,
feel
yeah.
to that character. He's very much the like he's the stodgy professor in the I
Mhm.
don't even know like the those things. It's like, no, you'll write your essays the way I want to write my essays. You'll fight
Yeah.
your wars the way I want to fight my wars. It very much has that sort of stereotypical feel to it. But yes.
Yeah, it does. And so you have there's another guy who's like willing to fund the cannons. So that's Schill,
Oh, I
Ferdinand von
missed that.
Schill. That's the guy who's like with the mustache, who's sort
I
of
thought that was
making love.
Klaus.
Was his name No, Klaus was the brother, right?
Oh, was that the brother? I thought that was the one who was in
So there's
love.
two brothers, and there's Schill, who's not a brother. Schill is in love with Maria, but he can't marry her because he's married to war.
Oh,
That guy,
right. Klaus is the guy with the violin, right?
Klaus is her other brother. She
Klaus
has
is the guy
one
with the
brother who's a
violin.
good brother because he
Yeah.
fights, and she has a bad brother because he wants to play the violin.
He went to play music.
Yeah, he's coded as kind of gay, I think.
I I mean, I think that's
Maybe.
sort of, yeah, I mean, I think that's there.
Yeah, and
Um,
he ends up drinking with the French troops at some point, right? And they're like,
yeah,
"Oh,
he ends up toasting the emperor. Yeah, he ends
yeah,
up toasting Napoleon and oh, the father has to burn the inn down after that.
yeah, yep, they do." Which I couldn't figure out what the hell was going on because they had a long conversation. We have to burn it down. No, we don't have to burn it down. Yes, we have to
I
burn it
mean,
down.
then I got that the dad burned it down, but then they were like, "Where is the dad?" And then it was like the next scene was like, "He died." It's like, how
In the
did he
fire?
die? Yeah, I guess he died in the fire. It's like
I
he couldn't stand to see a world without his inn. I'm like, I guess he's dead because you said it, but I don't know
I don't
how
know.
or when.
It took me forever to figure out like why did he burn the inn down? And I guess it's
Because
just
they said they needed to. This was the
why?
whole thing. Bit up, my goodness, Tom, where were you?
Did you even
Because Cla
watch the
no,
movie?
who was Shill?
She, yeah, is the
Gilles
mm,
gave a very long speech about how they had to destroy the inn because it was a perfect place. It was cover for them to move the artillery in to fire over the city. So
oh,
when
okay.
the dad was saying he was like, I can't ever live here anymore because my son toasted
Mhm.
Napoleon here, and he was like, that's good because we have to remove the inn because the inn would be a place for the enemy. It would provide comfort to the enemy. So he's like, we're going to have to burn it down. And Maria hasn't
Mm,
yet learned the necessity of sacrificing for the war, but the father basically says, yes, we must burn it down. And
mm.
this is the first major sacrifice that the citizens will
Oh,
make for the defense of Kolberg is the
mm,
father burning
burning the
down
inn.
his inn.
I realized,
Goodness gracious.
yeah, I'm very sorry. I didn't
How did you
realize
miss this?
that was why he burned it
Yes,
down.
that was why he burned it down. He burned
Yeah.
it down because otherwise the French troops could have used it for quarter.
Okay. Fair enough. So he burns it down. Yeah, and eventually they decide to flood the city when the French troops get in because
Which
that
is the
will
big, it's just a big sacrifice
it's
because
the
they
really big
say
sacrifice.
we have to sacrifice the city. You'll have to flood the southern end of the city because we can't defend it properly otherwise. And they say, well, hundreds of people will lose their homes. And they say, yes, that's a sacrifice. And then there's a big scene of them like 1,000 extras digging a trench, which you think that in 1944 they had better things for them to do, but I guess not. They had them digging a trench in peasant garb to flood an imaginary city to protect it from an imaginary invading army. That was what they that
That's
was
what
what
they
they
did.
did. I can well, we'll get to it later, but like yes, then they flood a decent chunk of the town but the sacrifice must be made to
Mm,
save it. We will destroy everything
mm,
to save the Volk. The people will
yep.
live if the buildings are destroyed, but the
Yeah.
Volk will survive.
And they do. They defeat them, and that's great.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
That's great. I yeah. So we'll get into what's wrong with this movie, and I think my favorite thing wrong
Let's
with
start
this
with
movie.
what's good. Let's start with
But let's start with what's good, or
let's start with
what
what's
it's
right.
trying to do. I think.
Yeah. Let's start
And
with
I
what it's trying to do and what it does that is fairly,
mhm.
fairly decent. Why I think people still watch it.
I think the ethos of it is very much it's an interesting collectivism that's connected to a sort of romantic spirit.
Yeah.
There's the idea of the soldier is a sort of romantic, almost poetic person. And the soldier is the highest order that a person can take. To defend the state is the highest order a person can take. And it's a romantic calling that also has a somewhat of a democratic appeal. And it's which is very interesting.
Very
Yeah.
much so. This is a strongly, which doesn't surprise. I mean, the Nazis were very big on sort of popular support, regardless of what was actually going on behind the scenes. They did want to, they might manipulate the people into believing it, but they very much wanted the people to believe it. There is very much a strong sense here that the people are important and the people must believe what we believe. Right? That's a strong sense here. And that so it's not a total surprise. It's a surprise to people who just see it as no, the Nazis said jump and everyone said how high. This feels more, this has more of a sense of an appeal being made
It
than
hasn't.
I think we would be customary to suspect would have
Yeah.
been reasonable.
Yeah, there is a sense of, there's also a sense of the people know what's right. And the engine of justifiable war is, first of all, it's a defense.
Yeah,
But it's also, it is the people who always speak the truth in this movie. And the
that's true.
best character is the representative of the people. He always presents as Nettelbeck,
Nettelbeck,
Nettelbeck.
Nettelbrow, Nettelbeck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Joachim Nettelbeck. Is a wonderful face. I love looking at his face. But
Yeah,
anyway,
he's a pretty good actor,
he's a
actually.
pretty good actor, yeah. Uh, he is always presents himself as his authority comes as the representative of the people, and he keeps saying that over and over again. And so there's this sort of sense of the muckety mucks, even the emperors screw up, but the people never do. And the you know you're a part of the people when you can sacrifice for the people. When you become a someone who is, let's say, a dilettante, so Fritz and his, or Klaus rather, and his violin, you break from the people. But if you're a working for the people and an artist in that work, you sort of become accepted, or that becomes a good thing. That becomes a bearer of truth. And I think that was also interesting too, that this kind of concept of the poet soldier is kind of connected to this whole somewhat democratic thing. You could see why this system appealed to people when it did.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
would agree with that. And there's a sense of it feels like a Mrs. Miniver. Like this is a very different. We've done some. We did Mrs. Miniver on our 2 seasons ago when we did our best pictures. We did
Was
Mrs.
it two
Miniver
seasons ago? Yeah, I think it's 2 seasons
two
ago.
seasons ago. We
Mhm.
did yeah, because we did it was 2 seasons ago when we did Mrs. Miniver and we paired it with Casablanca. And my major question at the time was why is Casablanca a really good movie and Mrs. Miniver is not a very good movie? This is in the Mrs. Miniver category. It is so preachy. It is talking directly to you, and everyone knows it's talking directly to you. And there's no Mrs. Miniver has very little real moral ambiguity. Like Casablanca has lots of moral ambiguity. That's what makes it really good. That's what still makes it very, very good. We see Rick's progression. No one progresses here except maybe Maria, because she's scared of war in the beginning and then she learns to sacrifice for war. Like she's the only one that does in the same sense Mrs. Miniver does, and she, the father
I
do, and
guess
all,
the emperor kind of does because he eventually agrees to
I
it.
guess that's true. He's our voice. We're meant to sort of be the proxy, and the emperor is our proxy, the audience. We're meant to sort of say, no, the people shouldn't have to suffer in the war, and it's like, no, the people must fight. And so there's this sense here of, I get it, but there's not much. People aren't doing much other than the obvious. Let's go from not being in favor of the war to being in favor of the war by witnessing the sacrifice of others, which is sort of what's going on with Rick, but not really. There's sort of Rick's progression is very different, but there's the movie just suffers from this sort of just relentless turning to the camera and sort of saying, "Oh, yeah, I get the parallels. Like we all get it." It's it's fascinating, and I sort of get it in the sense of why would they have spent, because the movie is sort of lavishly, the color is actually very nice in it, the costumes are very nice, the explosions are fairly good. Like, I think they burned a whole town to the ground, actually. Like, which maybe they could just do that in 1944. There's a lot of buildings are actually bombed and burned. It sort of has this feeling of like an enormous amount of resources went into making this thing. And in some sense, I get it because that was probably the last hope they had was just make all the people buy this thing. And if we can convince that, because there's an actually, again, it's a fairly decent scene. The acting is quite good, I would say, for the most part. And there's a fairly decent scene where the French send their emissary and he says, "You should surrender now." And the general, what's his name?
No, no, that wasn't
Giacomo.
him. That was
No, no, no. He sends him to the younger dude, the dude who's talking to the emperor.
oh
Blanking
um
on his name now. The one we just were mentioning.
uh Ginaciano?
Yeah,
Ginaciano?
Ganasino, whatever his name is.
Ginaciano.
They go to him and he says to Nettlebeck, and he says, "Oh, the French think that the only reason we're not surrendering is because of me, because the military is forcing the people to fight." And he says, "I want you to show them that that is not the case." And so they go to the balcony, and the people are all below, and he says, "Any of you who don't want to continue to fight, shout out now." And of course, the entire group is silent. And then he says, "Any of you want to continue to fight, go to your stations and prepare for battle." And of course, the entire, 1,000 people, which is, I mean, it's an enormous amount number of people that they brought in for this movie, were then sent out and they're all sent to their places. And so, of course, the idea here being like, you can't win because you literally will have to go through every single citizen. You can't win until every single, and therefore you can't win. You cannot defeat the entire citizenry. That's the theory of the movie. That's the thing that that's the thesis that the movie's presenting. And so I guess if you were at that point in 1944, 1945, that was your only thing you could hope for, was that people would just look and say, we can't defeat this. We'd have to literally destroy every single person in Germany. We can't do it. Therefore, we have to capitulate. I think that was what they were going for. That's why they put an enormous amount of resources into it. This was their, this was their only thing they could do at this point. They couldn't make bombs. They couldn't make tanks. They could make a movie though. And so this is what they put their resources into. And so I find that from a historical perspective, a fascinating insight into what was going on at this period. Because when I first saw this movie and thought, you made a movie in 1945? Like, what did it? I mean, if you've Tom and I were talking about this separately, like if you've ever read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich or Adam or Bullock's History of Hitler, these kind of things, like 1945 is bad. Like it's really bad. And they were making the most expensive movie they'd ever made. Then why? And you kind of watch this and go, oh, it's fascinating as a historical thing to see what they were putting their resources in and hoping would work. They couldn't do anything else. And so I found this interesting from a historical perspective. As a film, the costumes are nice. Some of the fight scenes are nice. The acting is surprisingly good.
Some of the performers are good.
Nettlebeck is particularly good.
Yeah, Heinrich George was Nettlebeck. He would die in 46. He eventually died.
Most we died shortly.
Yeah, he spent his last years entertaining Soviets by organizing plays in a concentration camp. So
Hmm.
he had the yeah. Um
He gives a good performance. Again,
he
even the sort of like evil, you know, compromising general.
mhm.
I don't know. He sort of has that what's his name? What's the principal from Ferris Bueller? He
Oh
sort of
yeah.
has kind of
Hmm.
has that feeling to there's this sort of like nine times. It
Hmm.
just has this sort of like a man who follows the rules. And it's a type, but the performances are pretty good.
Nobody's mustache twirling. There's none
No.
of that. There's a sort of a grounded realism in all of it. I think maybe Klaus is the furthest
He's the
from being
furthest from, I
grounded.
mean, he's just stupid. I mean,
It's yeah.
the man going, I don't even know how he died. I don't know why anybody would have been bombing a pond.
Yeah, you're not even entirely
Um,
sure because there's a bomb goes off, but it's
in a
behind
pond.
him.
In a pond. I mean, it's literally so the whole thing is like they flooded the land, as you mentioned before, and so Klaus, the foolish brother who doesn't understand the war, goes back to the house because he has to save his violin. And then as he's like swimming back with his violin on the southern side of the town where there are no troops, and later the troops will actually march across that land, so it doesn't make any sense. But suddenly but he just sort of gets bombed. Like he just sort of some explosions happen on the water and then he dies. So that's a particularly bad scene. It just doesn't make any sense. So yeah, he's bad. The scene with him with the French when he toasts Napoleon is actually pretty good. That's a decent scene. And again, that's a good scene. Like that's a scene with real tension. He doesn't want to toast Napoleon. He's sort of forced to do so. And then the father takes the glass and like walks outside and smashes it. And like,
Oh yeah, yes.
there's some good tension there. There's some real good acting going on. Klaus is pretty weak. Marie is a little weak. I mean, that stupid scene with her with the queen is just painful.
I have to say this is probably maybe the worst edited movie I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, it
Remember?
has it has the feeling of a Mystery Science Theater 3000 movie
Mhm.
editing. Like,
Yeah, we left off with the scene with the Empress and Maria,
oh yeah, yeah.
which is a good example of this. She is
That is
tasked.
the stupidest scene I've ever seen in a
It's
movie.
yeah, it's up there. She's tasked with. It looks like something out of The Room, the Tommy Wiseau movie.
Yeah.
She's tasked with bringing a letter to the emperor, and she can't get in. And eventually, she get into the empress or queen, whatever that. I think that she's
Again,
empress.
clever. Clever. Like that's a good writing. Okay.
Through a
Okay.
female servant. So there's
Yeah,
this kind of connection
clever.
of women, and it
Clever.
works. And she's so starstruck by the glory of the queen that she
Who
can't.
seems very inglorious. Like she just kind of
Yeah,
stands there.
she's just she has nice jewels, I guess, but
Guess.
she's not particularly attractive. She's not nearly as attractive as Maria, but
You
um,
know.
and they just cut back and forth to Marie staring at her in awe, just in awe, then bowing, then staring at her, then her staring back, then her staring at her, her staring back, her staring at her, bowing again, and it goes
For
on.
like a minute.
It's real
And
weird.
it's really weird. And then the queen is like, please speak. I must see the Tsar soon. And it's just like, I would be like, get out, you country bumpkin. Like, get out.
And then she
You,
doesn't, right? Then they go back and they do the thing
they
again.
just
They go back and forth.
stare.
Yeah.
And then it's like, come to me, my child. Is there something you wish to say to and then, it's like this,
You're
like,
from
but the
Colbert.
queen knows the people.
Mhm.
The people cannot speak up, but she can speak down. She knows the people. She will take the news of the people, and it's about like, that just felt so stupid. And that's just a bad scene. And there's a lot of very bad editing, just confusing editing, and just I didn't know we went back 7 years, and I don't know how I would have. And just scenes that we went to the Holy Roman Emperor, and then we went to another. I'm like, I have no idea. Is
Went to
that
Poland?
contemporaneous?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then we're in Poland, and I went,
Mhm.
what are they doing? And yeah, just a lot of it was very hard to sort of understand what the heck was going on. And just individual, as I said, even just I loved the like, your father died with the like in the house. I'm like, he did? Why didn't you show me
It's a
him
major
die?
supporting character. He just
He's been in a lot of scenes. I just watched him. I mean, I watched him burn the house down. But if you'd at least just showed me, like, it would have been very simple to have edited that properly. You could have shown him throw the torches into the barn, into the hay loft, which is what they did, and then have him, like, sit down on the ground and then watch the burn. And I would have thought, oh, he's clearly going to die in the fire. He just sat on the ground in the burning barn. That indicates to me he's going to kill himself in the barn. I now understand. You just didn't bother. So it was like, but you could have easily done it, but you didn't. So I guess that's just bad editing and writing.
Yeah, it's and Maria jumps from place to place
Yeah, she's in a
with
lot of random places.
she's
Like she
just
was in a fire brigade at one point and
she's
digging a ditch in another.
and she jumps and then at another point she's on a beach. She just
Yeah, she was in a
appears on a
beach and she was in a
beach.
boat. She was in a boat at one point.
Yeah,
She was in a boat.
she
She was in a
appears in a
beach.
boat and she's in the
She
town
was digging a
again.
ditch. She was yelling at her brother on the side of a pond, it's a flooded pond, when he blew up for some reason. Like it was just these like, why in what it seems an otherwise competently made film did you? I mean, I assume it was problems with resources and editing, but why did you just not show these scenes?
Yeah. Yeah, my favorite of the fire brigade is so she's in a fire brigade apparently.
Oh, I know what you're gonna go with. It
And
was great.
she's
It's really
holding
good.
she's holding the hose to the fire
Yeah.
brigade, and then she gets this handicap man who's missing a
He's missing
leg,
a
and
leg.
she's like, "Go, go, go," and she gives him the hose to hold, and then she runs because then he's gonna hold the hose despite the fact that he
While he's balancing a
no,
cane, like he's
and
missing a leg and he's
and
on a
then so
crutch
and the
balancing.
reason why is she has to go to the pump and help the other people pump the pump. She has to hold on to a thing that supports you and help pump it. Because apparently the disabled man can't do that, but he can hold the
The
hose that
hose.
yeah, that was oh I love that.
No, that was a brilliant moment. I went, why? I mean, again, the from a propaganda perspective, I get it. It's like even if you lost a leg in the last war, you can support in this war. Like that's clearly the message that's being portrayed, but just in a comically inept way of of watching this one-legged man with his crutch trying to hold a fire hose. I'm like, oh man, that's bad. That's bad scene. It's bad editing. And it's a fascinating piece of history. Like, right? I mean, this is just one of those things you just sort of watch and go, it's really neat to see what the thoughts were and priorities were in 1944 and 1945. Like, it's really interesting to see and surprising to see how many good performances they got out, and just the costumes are quite nice. The film looks pretty darn good. Like, it's poorly edited and poorly directed, but fine, we could get beyond that. So is Mrs. Miniver. Mrs. Miniver was not brilliant either. Um, but it's as a piece of history, it's very interesting. As a film, it's trash, but as a piece of history, it's a fascinating little insight as to at least what the propaganda ministers thought the people needed to see or hear in order to further the war.
Yeah, apparently Hitler thought this was worth more than 2 battalions or something. He said something like that.
I mean, there's a sense in which if it was taken seriously, he would have been right. I think that my understanding, especially at this point in the war, their major hope was that they would be able to hold off the Soviets and that a separate peace would be made. That basically the Western powers would fear Soviet advancement into Germany more than they feared an independent Germany. And so that was their hope, that they could make a separate peace with France and England and the United States before the Soviets arrived. So in that sense, the Kohlberg, if you can basically say we're going to turn the entire nation into an armed camp, then that threat makes sense. Like that threat, if you actually could convince your people to follow this and could convince your enemies that this was your strategy, and they're looking at this war going on into 1948, they might have just said, "Oh my God, we got to end it now." Like that's clearly what they were trying to do. It doesn't work because their military was so completely demolished by that point. It didn't matter. But and the people weren't going to do it anyway. But if you had managed to convince them that the war might go on until 1948, they probably would have stopped. There might have been a chance. So I think that was the point of it. It's failed, but it just gives you this insight into the delusion that's going on at this point that makes you that they think this is where they should put their resources. Nothing could have changed the course of the war by late 1944, 1945. But the fact that they think like, if we just make a movie, that'll change it. The US is building an atomic bomb, but we're gonna make the best movie ever, and the
Yeah.
people, the Volk, will change it.
Yeah,
Isn't that
it's
that's
really interesting, and it just goes to show they kind of saw themselves, I think, as artists. Like aesthetics were really, really important to the Nazis, and
yeah.
that kind of self-presentation. In a way, I think it's just not necessarily true. I mean, optics are always going to be an important part of military affairs, whatever country it is. But in terms of their kind of political beliefs, like making art about your politics really, really mattered to these people. And so it is just a fascinating little nugget of insight into that like that like yeah, the U.S. is going to make a bomb, but
We're gonna make a
we're going to make
movie.
a really
They're
good
the US is
movie,
putting all
and that's
their
gonna
resources into
yeah
the bomb. They're gonna make a movie. It's gonna be good.
that'll, that'll
Gonna-
show them.
But it's just fascinating. And I mean the irony is Paul Heyse is long dead, and I don't think any indication would have been that he probably wasn't a proponent of National Socialism. In fact, his name is intentionally kept is nowhere near the script. And they very much, I think, wanted to have Nobel Prize winners, the Nazis did, to sort of bolster many of these kind of activities. So if they thought that his name would be helpful, they would have put it on there, but they didn't. So there's sort of this irony that, and I wonder if maybe did his name get tarnished in some ways because of this kind of association. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I think his writing is worth a second look. So is he in your canon?
Oh, our canon question. I don't know. It's part of the problem is the person has to be influential, so it's not just aesthetically good, right?
Yeah.
I think there's aesthetic value here, though because of the shortness of these works, it's more compelling rather than, a slam dunk type thing. But he's had like no influence. That's the
No.
problem, I think.
But like Edgar Allan Poe doesn't really write novels and has had a great deal of influence.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
don't think
yeah.
it's, you can have short story writers. Stephen
Oh,
Alice.
I only meant that in the sense of I don't I we haven't read like hundreds of his
Oh
pages.
no, no, I
Right,
agree. Yes, yeah.
yeah. So it's kind of hard to really give a better evaluation, but if you read Ulysses, you can kind of get a sense of choice, even if you haven't
Yes.
read Finnegan's Wake or The
Or anything
Dubliners.
else. Yeah, you
Yeah.
you know what's going on there.
Yeah, you
But
get
yeah,
okay.
this guy, I don't know, I've read two of his short stories. They're pretty good.
Hmm.
This guy seems to be worth another look. But yeah, to your point, he doesn't seem to have had any influence. No one seems to
Yeah.
have cared.
And I think that somewhat matters. And when you look at
Yeah,
the
I would
the,
agree.
the canon of, if you just think of this set of writer, Nobel Prize writers as this is just some sort of canon, right? It's an invented canon. It makes sense with the other writers we've been reading, I think, because there's still idealism and the peasants and the people of the land. It's a lot better than that stuff, but it's still a very rose-colored look at the past. And I think
Yeah,
that's what's been the kind of universal thing in Nobel Prize winners in literature.
up to this point, yeah.
Up to this point, yeah, it seems like in these early years, their idea of what modern and vulgar language literature, so non-Latin Greek literature, that's great is it needs to celebrate the ideals of the past.
Yeah.
And even though I think you're right that he's making a modern move in a way that's very different from Bjornstern and Bjornson and Sully Prudhomme,
Oh,
everybody's
yeah,
favorite
absolutely.
poet, Sully Prudhomme. There's still a continuity with these other writers. And it is kind of fascinating because we have what, a Swede, a Norwegian, this German now. I
We
think
had
actually,
another German, the German who won for his historical work.
oh, for
He
Hamsun.
was like the second winner. Yeah, he's like the
Yeah.
second guy who won. We never did him in the show, but frankly, I'd like to read some of his. But he was like a 15-volume history on the city of Rome.
Yeah,
No one
it's
made a movie
actually
on
it's
it, but it sounds fairly interesting. I tried
yeah.
looking at getting copies of it. Again, it's another one of these things like, someone had it on
Audible
eBay.
has it.
Oh, Audible did. Oh, I didn't even know that. Oh, I should
Yeah,
look because when I
Audible.
looked it up on eBay, it was like someone had like the complete set. And it was like $1,700. I'm like, yeah, I'm not that interested.
Yeah. Um,
No one else has a copy of this thing.
Momsen, his name is, I believe, right?
Mumson, I think that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
But so there's a German, there's a Swede, there's a Norwegian,
but they're all,
there's
and yeah, Spaniard, but
this is Spaniard. Yeah,
yeah, in Echecarre, and
the French.
Provençal,
Yeah,
and
Provençal, who's sort of French essentially.
yeah, he wouldn't say, but that's yeah, but effectively,
Yeah,
and yet
effectively,
they're
and
all is this is kind of
Polish guy.
and a Polish writer, though I think Sienkiewicz is also a little different too. He feels a little bit apart than
Kiewicz is separate from the rest of this.
yeah, and yet there is still this kind of sense of the idealism of the past, the land, the people, a celebration of the people, and vulgarity. Despite vulgar languages, vulgarity is just not in it. So I
No.
would say, from my, if you're going to say what endures, right? If we're going to say the canon that we would want is that which endures in a meaningful way, obviously not, because there's a
No.
test there. But if we're going to say that it, how it makes sense in terms of what like the Swedish Nobel Prize Committee thought of as canonical, it absolutely makes sense. It connects
Yeah.
with
100%. Yeah.
all of these works in a way, even if it is, at least in these stories, a bit ironic in its connection. Maybe in a way that Alf Peterson, the Nobel Prize Committee
Didn't pick
chair,
up, didn't notice.
missed, possibly.
I don't know if you
Yeah,
noticed it.
yeah, I know, maybe not. I would hope he doesn't. Should also mention, I think he is like the fifth oldest Nobel Prize winner of literature. Hesse.
Heisa
Heyse, yeah.
is probably pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He was very, very old when he won this award. Um,
The only other ones I know who are old are like I know Doris Lessing was very old, and I know
mhm.
Alice Munro are very old.
Yeah.
I don't know who else was very old, but I know those two were in the top. But those are recent. It's the only reason I know they were in the top because they're recent.
Yes, the oldest was let's see, Doris Lessing, Theodore Mommsen, so
Okay, so our
the
German dude, yeah.
yeah, the other guy. Sefret, who I don't know, Sefret,
No idea.
and Alice Munro
Yep,
was
Alice
also.
Munro.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
I only know Lessing and Monroe because they were recent and they
Hmm.
both died. Well, Lessing died right afterwards. Monroe only died recently, but like a
Yeah.
couple of years ago, I think.
Oh, yeah. I guess he was 80 when he won it. How old was Mum?
Hesse?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mumson won it
So
in.
Alice Monroe must have been in her late 80s then, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, he won it in 1902. Mumson won it in
Do you know
1902
two? Yeah.
when he was 84. Oh God, that's a good. I guess the how much value did the Nobel Prize have in
It still always has had the, I think generally in US dollars, I think it's had the same
no, I mean in
relative
terms
value.
of reputational value in 1902. It's the
I
second
think it
one.
was still big because
Yeah.
from what I remember reading the book, it was the theory people thought it should because it was the largest cash prize. I mean, that was
Yeah,
why it's
yeah.
big.
Mm,
If you're giving people $1 million, the equivalent of $1 million, that's going to attract attention.
mhm,
Like the Pulitzer attracts attention, and it's like $50,000.
mhm.
The Nobel Prize at 1 million, no matter what, people thought it was supposed to be important. And so I think it would have made national headlines even then, even if it was like this guy, this guy, this guy. Like I think people were waiting for Ibsen and Tolstoy and Twain and Strindberg and all these real writers to win. Which when we get to our what are we going to call it? Our 1A season. So when we get to our next season, when we finish with these guys, I think we'll go what up through 1918, and then we're going to go back and look at all the people who from 1901 to 1918 who died during that period who should have won the Nobel
Yes.
Prize rather than most of these people. So I think there was a sense that it should have been the most important prize, but it wasn't.
Yeah, yeah. It had its own thing.
Yeah. So
Um, but yeah, I don't know. How about you? What do you think?
no, I mean, I don't think he can be because he's of so little importance. I think I would be interested in reading more of his stuff because I think there might be something here that's interesting, but it could just be that this guy is just overly repetitious and he's actually kind of dull. but he does seem to have something going that, again, is more interesting and more obviously modern than some of these other writers who just have dated into just dust. And so that's why, and that's why I think he's not important. But could he be? He's the only one we've read so far that I thought I could read a little more Heyse,
Hmm.
but that's it.
Yeah, who isn't Kipling? Yeah.
Who is in Kipling or even Sienkiewicz, I guess. But
Or
I've read them before.
Lagerlof, I would,
Again, I guess yeah, I've read more Lagerlof, but I guess they're the only ones I've
of the
read that I
new
hadn't read
ones.
before. I
Mhm.
knew Lagerlof, I'd read other Lagerlof, I've read other Sienkiewicz, I've read other Kipling. So they're not I wasn't introduced to them through our discussion here. He's the first one I've been introduced to that I've gone, "Oh, I would like to read more of him." Yes, Lagerlof, Sienkiewicz, and Kipling I've read before, and so I would continue to read other things by them. But I none of the other ones that we've read that I hadn't been introduced to would I have read. Paul Heyse I might. Kip is he canon? Is he influential in Western literature? Apparently not. But
We'll see. Maybe we'll revive him via this podcast. If you like Kohlberg, then what is wrong with you? But if you liked Hesse, check out these other adaptations. We have Ein Ring, a TV movie from 1991. Zwei Lebengeschichten, also a TV movie from 1980. Your Favorite Story, which was a television serial from the 1950s that did anthology work, and it had one episode titled The Fury, which was based on this story. So there was actually American television adaptation of this from the 1950s. I could not find it, but it is out there somewhere. You can rate and review this show anywhere fine podcasts are available. For those viewing in YouTube land, if you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the Talking Studios channel for all our exciting content, and follow us on social media at Talking Studios. Check out other shows by Talking Studios, including Talking Pictures Trivia, where we explore movies through trivia, Keep Making Movies, where we explore micro-budget films, Limited Lexicon, where we play through text-based adventure games, and Get the Point, where we slowly reveal a movie poster and try to guess which movie poster it is. Got a question for us? Call the Talking Studios hotline at 201 467 8679 and leave a message. It may be featured on a future episode. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Adapt It, wherever fine podcasts are found. Join us next week when we discuss the 1911 Nobel Prize recipient Maurice Maeterlinck and his play The Bluebird, as well as the 1976 film version. See you then.
Wow, Talking Studios.
Next week, we'll be discussing the 1911 Nobel Prize winner Maurice Maeterlinck and his play, The Bluebird. Pat, who would you hire to direct this work?
so I would have gone with one of two. My joke was my serious answer. I think this actually could work. Would be Nick Park, the guy who does Wallace and Gromit. I
Oh,
think you could.
okay.
I think this would be
Oh.
fun as like a
Hmm.
claymation, like a series of claymation shorts. I think that would be kind of fun. And my joke answer would be, along the same lines, a series of claymation shorts, but with Seth Green in the style of like Robot Chicken,
Oh,
and it would
yes.
it would just be like the
Mhm.
horrific existential version of Bluebird. So
Yeah, I suppose it's an existential play. It's just not horrific or
yeah, it's just not horrific and just mocking of
yeah.
everything.
Oh, God.
But Nick Park, I think Nick Park
That
could be
would
a
be
fun
fun.
acclamation version. And there's a reason why I think actually it would work better than the movies that we actually watched, but we can get into that
Okay.
later.
I had a similar answer. Mine is the the Quay brothers, excuse me, who are they made a bunch of short films. They made two full-length films which aren't particularly good. One actually was one of the early films of Mark Rylance, so before he was famous. But their better movies are these short films that use stop motion. So they use stop motion figures and things
Oh, so
like that.
interesting that we both thought of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's their movies tend to be um a bit more fairy tale creepy than possibly this work is. My thought was that this work is actually a little darker than it appears on the surface. I mean,
I would agree
it's
with that. Yeah, I
yeah.
would agree.
I think the Quake brothers might be too dark for this material. They'd have to kind of lighten it a little bit, but that's who I thought of. And when I remembered I have to do this, but I think it would still be cool to sort of see that kind of stop motion thing to capture this kind of fantasy world. I think it actually would work a lot better than
It
the
would work a
live
lot better than the
action.
live actions. And again, I have a theory we can talk about it next week as to at least partially why that is. But I think it would work a lot better.
Okay, sounds good. Audience, we will see you next week.